Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a very fun weapon, and that's going to be the Greatsword of Damnation. So this is a strength faith style weapon. Do need a little bit of dex, but we're going to be running this on a level 139 build with 37 endurance, 52 strength, 20 dexterity, 20 faith. And I found that to be quite optimal. We also do have the option to switch over to a heavy infused backhand blade, and I find that's just really nice for chase downs. But we also have the Shard of Alexander, which is going to boost this Ash of War. We're also going to have the Dagger Talisman, which is also going to boost this Ash of War. And if you wanted to, you could switch over to things like the Spear Talisman or just some of the other ones that are good for this type of moveset, because this has the same moveset as the Claymore. So you get both a crouch poke as well as a heavy attack poke, and that just makes this feel so good. I've always been a Claymore enjoyer, and having a weapon that's this strong with the Claymore moveset is fantastic. So the big deal about this weapon is going to be the Ash of War Golden Crux, and that's going to look like this, where you go up in the air and you're going to be able to what's effectively grab your opponent. So you go up in the air, you slam this down on their head, and if you miss, you can also go for this follow-up, which is really nice if you have multiple players trying to, take you down in that moment. So super fun Ash of War. We also have this backhand blade as a nice chase down option, just because the Claymore has a fairly predictable, the Sword of Damnation has a fairly predictable movement pattern, especially during chase down. So obviously it's nice to have something else as just like a good option. The running heavy is super nice, and if you want to switch over to the power stance moveset just for a little bit more damage, you have that option available. So we're really focusing on boosting that Ash of War. One thing that I did notice was that the Dagger Talisman and the Shard of Alexander both boost this Ash of War. However, the Blade of Mercy does not take effect. So even though this seems to function as a critical attack, maybe they don't count grab type attacks as critical hits, but just trying that out, I noticed that my AR was not improved after using the Golden Crux Ash of War. So that's just something to be kind of aware of. And then the other thing that I want to mention is that we're going to be running 115 poise. According to people that kind of test this stuff that I know, 115 is a good poise breakpoint. I've been running 101 in a lot of showcases, and I'll also have subsequent videos over the course of the next month that are going to have 101 poise, but 115 is a better poise breakpoint. So I'm going to suggest that. Also, this armor does kind of work well with this weapon, and it's optimal weight-wise, so something to think about there. You'll see me in the showcase not running this armor, but I would recommend it. If you're not concerned about poise, I would probably switch off the Bullgoat Talisman and throw on the Spear Talisman, just because you're going to be going for a lot of pokes, and especially like the R2 attack that comes out as a poke, that's going to be a nice chunk of counter damage. I'm not sure if the Ash of War gets buffed by the Spear Talisman. If anybody does know that, they can let me know in the comments, but it would make sense that it would, because it's like a pierce type damage. So if you do have, multiple opponents attacking you while you go for that Ash of War, where, this is a great Ash of War to have as just kind of like a shut down people mashing on you type thing. Yeah, this is going to be fantastic. So it gets a lot of hyper armor. It's super strong. And yeah, that's enough talking about it. Let's go ahead and see how this performs in the showcase. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I would appreciate it. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the invasions and the duels. Alright, so our first invasion, we're going to have a very dramatic opening as we come down this elevator. Now, we see some glowing light off to the side, and we wonder, hey, that could be a player. So we throw a Frostpot, and it is a player, so that's great. And then they go for this incantation that has insane hyper armor. But one great way to shut down hyper armor is to go for a grab style attack, and here we actually get both players simultaneously. So even though you only get to damage one, you still can get the grab on two players at the same time, which is just awesome. And then we get a final grab on this host and do manage to come out with the victory. So there you can very quickly just understand the utility of having a grab type weapon at your disposal, especially one that does insane damage. So here we go ahead and physic up, and this is going to be a 3v1 in the tower settlement area, one of my favorite places to invade. And we get our buff off, but we're not able to land our grab attack, Golden Crux. So we're going to try to bait our opponents forward, potentially use just kind of the room as a way to maneuver and funnel people, and then also we have the PvE in the mix, so that's pretty great. We do have some sleep pots that we're throwing out. We're not sure if people are going to get aggressive, but sometimes it can be nice to throw a pot, and then if somebody aggresses into it, you can hit them with a stun with your greatsword, and then they'll usually get slept in that moment because they're stuck in one spot for a second and the sleep buildup just accumulates. So that's kind of the theory of why I do that. Even if the pot misses, it can be a useful tactic. We do get a guard break, however, not in time to get the riposte, so that's unfortunate there, but that's okay. We have this absolutely ridiculous weapon on our side, and here we can just see what happens when we decide to press L2. Like 3 people are around us, doesn't really matter. We'll just grab that, I don't know, piercing headshot and come out with a victory against one player and turn it into a 2v1. So yeah, it's tough to be on the receiving end of this. I've definitely gotten hit with it a number of times. It's very difficult to roll, and it seems somewhat latency dependent whether or not you're actually able to roll through it. I would say spacing it is probably your best bet. And yeah, like it's just scary. You need to be very aware of the weapon you're facing if you're facing this one, and just kind of pay attention to what your opponent is trying to do and always be ready for them to go for that. So here we do finally get the guard break with enough time to grab the riposte, and the host here is attacking us with some backhand blades, but we're going to go ahead and grab our ridiculous Ash of War on their head and switch over to our backhand blade for the chase down. And there we can just see how much nicer it is to go for that chase down with the backhand blade rather than a greatsword. Next up, we're going to have another group of 3, and this time we're going to be in the library area. I always forget what it's actually called. I know it's not called the library, but it's like the Storehouse, I think that's right. Anyway, we're on the first floor here, and there's a lot of stuff coming our way, so we're going to try to shut down what we can with the sleep pop, potentially get a proc, and maybe hop in for like a nice jumping attack. I don't think you can get the Ash of War while somebody's in a sleep animation, because I know you can't get backstabs or anything like that when someone is slept or madness, so I think criticals don't work in those moments, so I'm not going to try it in that moment, not really risk it here. We do see this player turtling quite a bit, so we go ahead and go for the Hammer Talisman, and that allows us to do more poison damage against their shield, and that's pretty helpful in that moment. We get the guard break, however we don't have the Misor Chord as our soft swap in that moment, so we don't actually get the finish. Here we go for just a random L2 to shut down their L2, and that proves to be quite successful. We're going to have to deal with a host that's very well positioned for the type of game they're playing. They're going to be running some magic, and that's going to make our lives kind of difficult here as we want to focus these players. We need to look out for Bolt of Grandsax, but just random spells that are coming in from the host as they're kind of perched up on that statue, just kind of tossing things our way. So we can see some giant frozen meatballs coming in, hitting the PvE perfectly, so it stuns us as well, which is unfortunate, but we do just kind of back off a little bit. Incoming, we do have a Bolt of Grandsax. This player goes for some shield pokes, which is not really advised, especially since they've already been guard broken once, but we're going to again need to back off a little bit and just try to reset here. I forgot that there was just kind of this opening in the bookshelves where this host can actually still send spells my way, but just kind of backing off a little bit I find to be optimal in this moment, because we do have at least one player chasing us. So this player with Bolt of Grandsax is quite bold, and just as we wanted to get our kind of counter attack, we get hit with a meatball, but this time we do have our Misor Chord on the ready for the riposte, and after the guard break we come out with just a 2v1 situation left, which is much easier. So this is going to take a little while for us to get situated. Essentially, we don't want that player to be there anymore, so we're going to either just spend some time seeing if the host is, or the other phantom is going to come get us. Otherwise, we're just going to set up here and use the great bow to try to knock down the player that is kind of being the nuisance here. So now we can see that we do have a nice clean shot. They're not moving, so we can line it up, and we do get them knocked down. And in that moment, the Phantom was kind of aggressing a little bit, so that would have been nice to kind of capitalize on that. Unfortunately, my menu is in disarray just because I've been trying to both run this character for PvE and for PvP, and changing up my menu and making as many videos as I've been working on. It just hasn't really made sense to redo my inventory every single time, so I do apologize for that. There's going to be some slightly less than optimal play with inventory management in some of these, but I hope you understand, and my normal play style is a little bit more organized, I should just say. So we're going to go ahead and land a nice jumping attack here. We have pulled out our Misor Chord just for some quicker swings rather than trying to, hit them in between rolls with the Greatsword. And here the host is just kind of wandering around us. Unfortunately, we go for our L2, shove our giant sword directly through the top of their head, and that's going to finish them off, which does make sense. Like, that seems lore accurate to be able to finish an opponent with a sword shoved through the top of their head. But next up we have an opponent running Star Fists, and we're getting some decent damage on them. We get them very close to no HP, but they go for a heavy attack just as their host comes in, and that makes our lives a little bit difficult, but they decide to stay aggressive, which was a bold move for sure. And we're able to just kind of utilize the quickness of the backhand blade to finish off that opponent and turn it into a one-on-one. So we're going to go for just some random running heavies. We're not really sure what they're going to be doing, but it's nice to have a nice hyper armor type attack to throw out randomly. We're going to go ahead and jump over that fire and try to get in a couple attacks here. And while we could have gone for a follow-up R1, it just felt a lot better to go for an L2. So sometimes that's what I like to use this weapon for, is just like the victory is in your hand. You have different options of what to do, and then you just do the most entertaining looking one here. So here's another instance where we get the grab on both players simultaneously, but only damage one, which is, I just think it's so funny that that's possible. The Phantom here is remaining aggressive despite being very low on HP. We do need to look out for the incoming Taker's Flame, and then we go ahead and just trade with their Storm Assault because they don't have enough HP to take a jumping attack. So that feels like the correct thing to do. And then we go ahead and roll in and grab a backstab on the player that's running the Power Stance Greatswords. And we try to line up a nice heavy attack. We don't get it to connect quite so well, but we go for a nice light attack, followed up by a Ravioli Step, followed up by a couple crouch pokes, and we've done a decent amount of damage. Now, they randomly throw out some mashes, which, you know, is not a bad move, especially with Power Stance Greatswords. We try to get that same roll-in backstab again, don't quite manage, but we do get a nice Estus punish, and then here we get a nice heavy attack. We were thinking about maybe going for a Ravioli Step, but it didn't seem like the right situation, and then we get the random grab for the finish. Yeah, so kind of the game plan here, if you haven't caught on, is to get like 1 or 2 hits on your opponent, so they have like sub 1500 HP, and then just hit them with an L2, and that will pretty much do the trick. Like, it doesn't need to be much. This next is a group of 2, and I believe they were ganking here. I encountered them earlier, and they were a difficult situation to deal with. They had very good kind of coverage of each other, I would say, and a player running the longest great spear in the game can really, you know, cover a lot of distance with that, and then somebody casting very strong faith incantations can really cover a lot with that as well. So anytime I try to focus on one, I get hit with the other, which is definitely the right way to play a 2v1. And here they're using the emit force, or whatever it's called, quite liberally, and it is difficult, but we need to back up. Like, trying to play in that area was not really working for us. Potentially having some PvE could work for us, and here we're backpedaling somewhat unsuccessfully as we get into this corner, but we get this host low on damage, which means we can have a little bit of time to focus on this caster, and yeah, we managed to hit them with the L2, which is amazing, just after they've gone for their healing incantation. And here we go ahead and swap over to the Misericord, excuse me, and grab just a little bit of HP we need left. So now the host is all on their own. They're not going to have the healing incantations from their friend, which is pretty great for us. We do have some poison built up, so we feel like we should just abolish that real quick. And the host is going for some random jumping light attacks. We can kind of trade into their light attacks with our hyper armor, and then we swap over to the backhand blade for the very last bit of HP. So yeah, again, I can't stress enough how much I like the backhand blade for finishing players. It's just the fact that you maintain so much forward momentum while you're going for your attacks is amazing. Next up we have a 3v1 in, I think it's called like the Dragon Pit or something. Here we land an L2 on the host, and they have just a sliver of HP left, and we think we could have a little bit more fun here, so we're going to go ahead and back off, let the host heal, and then just try to use this slightly treacherous terrain to get some more damage on the Phantoms. So this player is going for some rather long Ashes of War. I was wondering here if I could get this player slept and then go for a running heavy and then knock them off the cliff. Most of the game plan worked out, we just couldn't get the angle on knocking them off the cliff, so definitely sleep pots in this moment when everybody's just kind of stuck all in one spot is going to be quite helpful. And here we do finish off one player. We managed to time a jump so that we don't get knocked out of the air and get up on that ledge, and that was huge. And then here, as this player goes for the mash with their magma curve sword, we just deliver our great sword into the top of their cranium. So a nice moment there, and a great way to shut down the magma curve sword, which is it's definitely difficult, especially with the poise changes. It feels like a challenge to play against sometimes, especially with bad latency too. So having that option is quite nice, I would say. Here we go for some Prattling pate exchanges. So this is the new Prattling pate. To my knowledge, it's the only one in the DLC that's new, and like that's the one that they gave us, so that's amazing. I find that very entertaining. Here we have some nice spacing on the host, and we're able to get a nice whiff punish. They go for their Ash of War, and actually have had very good rolls in this invasion so far, just managing to dodge pretty much everything that's come our way. We've only taken a little bit of damage, and we go ahead and throw a Frost Pot, hoping to get that Phantom frosted. We do need to look out for this Ash of War coming from the host, and I do know that these two were definitely ganking here. I invaded them several times, so they are kind of like set up for anything that can come their way to some extent. And when the Greatsword is not working out for the host, they'll be switching over to a lot of Fan Daggers, some Bloodhound Step, as well as a Misericord. So an interesting strat, but we'll see what we can do to counter it. We do take a decent amount of damage from that Lightning Incantation. That's new, and my roll timing for it is not great. And I definitely feel like I end up taking damage from it somewhat often, so I need to get used to that. Again, lots of chip damage coming from the host, running a very fun to experience build, but I guess mine is also fun to experience. And here we do manage to shut down their Bloodhound Step and Misericord attacks with just one single L1, or L2 rather. So a delightful moment there with some funny players. Next up, we're going to be in the Darklight Catacombs, which is kind of an interesting spot to be. It's you know, kind of true to its name, extremely dark if you don't have the areas unlocked. We see a lot of the scatter shot coming from the host. Honestly, not one of my favorite weapons in multi-opponent situations, like the Smith's Script daggers and whatnot. So we'll be dealing with some projectiles for sure, but you know, it's par for the course, so we come to expect it. We'll also be dealing with some substantial desync from the emit force. So yeah, that was a strange moment there where it definitely got caught on the stairs, but we still got hit by it. Fortunately, we didn't take very much damage, and here we're just trying to figure out the right way to approach this. We go for a jumping attack on the Phantom. We don't get hit by the incantation somehow, which is really nice. And here we just start aggroing the caster a little bit and then swap over to the Phantom. So that's definitely a good way to go. However, the chip damage is coming in hot and heavy from the host as they switch over to the Smith's Script daggers. So we're going to need to look out for that. We go for a nice running heavy on the Phantom here. Nobody's doing too much damage, which is really nice. And here we do catch the roll of our opponent and hit them with the L2. So yeah, I think if you run this build, you'll find a lot of success, regardless of your skill level. It's kind of the biggest takeaway. I think you can play this in like a high skill ceiling way. Like the Claymore is one of the best fundamental weapons in the game. Or, I mean, with hyper armor, it lacks some of the requirements for fundamental skill, I would say, but it's definitely a great way to improve, and it's just a very solid weapon. So having that moveset is great, but having an automatic win button does change things a little bit. So we do have a player right here swapping over to the martial arts, going for the dry leaf arts, I believe is what they're called, and they're doing a decent job of getting in hits and then light rolling away. So we would like to change that if we can. We go for our L2. They space it well, which is not super difficult on light roll, and we're probably going to want to be focusing mostly on the backhand blades for this player. So I don't know if backhand blades are like an invasion must in this kind of new era of Elden Ring, but I feel like they might be. Just your ability to chase down light rolling players and get off very quick, high damaging attacks is so substantial. And they also just have great scaling with a lot of different setups. Like, obviously they're optimal for decks, but you can run them on strength, you can run them occult, you have a lot of different options. And, you know, being able to catch up to players, like, I think this was such a good idea from FromSoft to counter light roll. Rather than, like, you know, taking away more iframes or anything or reducing distance, they just gave us more forward momentum, which does make it difficult for all the weapons that don't have that forward momentum, but at least you have options. Now for our final invasion, we're going to be actually in the base game, so it pains me to be here, especially because it doesn't look as good in my opinion, but we're going to be on the Ganker beach, which is just a classic. And these players are running base game weapons. They're running the Blasphemous Blade, which is totally fine, but they don't have kind of the raw power that the DLC weapons have, and so they're at a bit of a disadvantage. So maybe that kind of evens things out, where they have 2 players and I have 1 DLC weapon. And we do need to look out for these swings. They're doing a good job of kind of keeping things inconsistent or frame trapping me, which is pretty scary when you're dealing with 2 Greatswords. Here we just go for an L2. We do land the initial part of the damage, which it is worth noting that if I think it depends on their roll, but the damage comes in 2 parts, and obviously you're kind of guaranteed to get the first part, but I think players will often roll or you're kind of guaranteed the second part, but players will often roll the first part. But when you do land that first part, it's huge. It's like close to 500 damage, followed up by like upwards of, I don't know, 1,000 or something. So yeah, like the the damage potential is crazy. But yeah, let's move on to the duel portion of the showcase. So this first player is going to be Sleeping Hollows. So this is a really strong player, someone I've played in fight clubs a number of times. And here we get a nice poke early on, and we get another nice heavy attack to catch their roll. So good forward momentum and good range with that heavy attack. And here they're going for a number of attacks with their light greatsword, and I know that they don't typically go for parries, so I'm not super worried about that, but you know, seeing a medium shield is always a little scary. However, I think they will be getting a very nice perfect block in this duel, so that's always cool to see. We go for our L2 and they masterfully roll it, and then we unmasterfully roll directly into their flaming strike. So we're about even on health. We're going to go ahead and get in one nice swing, and we actually miss our follow-up. Oh, that was the perfect block, I believe. And then we switch over to the backhand blades and just kind of come in for the finish. And I can see there they were actually swapping their talisman. So how much ground you can cover with the backhand blades. You need to space differently, which is kind of the big takeaway, is if those come into the picture, you need to space dramatically differently than if, you know, somebody is just running a different weapon. Next up, we're going to have a player running a greatsword, and this is going to be a nice greatsword off. I definitely appreciate the patch 110 or the patch 112 changes to greatsword hyper armor. You can kind of continue to maintain priority rather than just mashing into each other's faces. Speaking of which, as they go for their Ash of War in my face, I go for my Ash of War in their face, and we do come out with a victory, unsurprisingly. Our next opponent is going to be running a duelist shield, and we do have the backhand blade on our side, so we're going to be utilizing the blind spot Ash of War, which really does a good job of getting around the duelist shield, as you might imagine. So we get a couple of nice hits in. We're going to switch back over to our backhand blade here, and we do get the second blind spot. So we've been doing a good job of mixing things up, and here we're managing to get the grab with Golden Crux and the victory. So yeah, this is like the ultimate cold shower of a weapon. It is quite overtuned in my opinion. We'll see how it changes over time, but our next opponent is going to be running a bit of a bleed build. We go ahead and get a nice jumping attack and then switch over to our offhand backhand blade, and then here we don't even get the grab because the impact does finish off our opponent. Next up, we have a player running a curved greatsword, and we're going to go ahead and grab a nice running heavy early on. We do manage to land a nice heavy attack as well, just well spaced and interrupt their attack, which is ideal there. They go for the power stance moveset. We hop in around with backhand blade, and as they go for sword dance, we go for golden crux. We don't get the grab properly, but we do get the damage, and then we come out with a nice light attack for the finish. Our next opponent is going to be quite good. They've been they've been running the Great Spear here in the arena, and they go for some nice quick attacks. We're able to roll both of them, and then we actually get 2 hits. So not sure if that was a true combo. I imagine they probably wanted to roll out of that. They go for a nice turn and burn, and we catch their roll with a running heavy. We go for a nice crouching attack and delay jumping heavy, and they go for some reverse jumps, which I very much appreciate. We try to land Golden Crux, and then we go for the follow-up just to see if it will hit. It does not, and we appreciate their reverse jumps, so we're going to go ahead and try to start ourselves up for a reverse jump of our own. We do manage to do that, and this time we get the R1 for the finish. So yeah, a super fun duel with a player that had great movement. Our next opponent is going to be running the dreaded Fire Knight's Greatsword. So this one does have a true combo. Fortunately, I got knocked out of the air during that first hit, and we're just trying to space carefully, get in 1 hit, and then obviously just press L2 and make the comeback of all time, which is very impressive, and everyone is super surprised. So yeah, a nice victory there, and that's going to conclude our showcase of the Greatsword of Damnation. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I would appreciate it, and have a good day.